You walk into a room full of people you have never met and will probably never see again. And within seconds, some part of your brain is already calculating. How do I look? Did that come across wrong? Are they judging me? On some level, that none of this matters. These people are strangers. Their opinion of you will have no practical consequence on your life. And yet the discomfort is real, the self-consciousness is immediate, and no amount of telling yourself it does not matter seems to make it stop. This is not vanity. It is not weakness. It is one of the oldest and most deeply embedded systems in the human brain, firing exactly as it was designed to fire. The problem is that it was designed for a world that no longer exists. To understand why the opinion of a stranger feels so significant, you have to go back to the conditions under which your brain evolved. For the vast majority of human history, there were no strangers in the modern sense. You lived in a small group, typically between 50 and 150 people, and almost everyone you ever encountered was someone you would encounter again. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, whose research into group sizes across human and primate societies gave rise to what is now called Dunbar's number, found that the human brain appears to be structured to track and maintain relationships with roughly 150 people at any given time. In that world, your reputation was everything. If people in your group thought poorly of you, the consequences were severe and immediate. You might be excluded from cooperative hunts. You might lose access to food sharing. You might find yourself without allies when you needed protection. Social standing was not a luxury, it was a survival mechanism, and the brain developed an exquisitely sensitive system for detecting and responding to social evaluation, because the cost of being judged negatively was potentially fatal. That system is still running in you today. It has not been updated. It cannot distinguish between a disapproving glance from a close friend, whose opinion will shape your social standing for years, and a passing look from someone in a coffee shop you will never see again. To your ancient social brain, both register as potential threats. Both trigger the same monitoring circuits, the same low-level anxiety, the same urge to manage the impression you are making. Psychologist Mark Leary at Duke University has spent decades studying what he calls sociometer theory. His core argument is that your self-esteem is not primarily a measure of how you feel about yourself. It is a gauge of how much you believe you are valued by others. It functions like a social fuel gauge, constantly monitoring the signals around you for evidence that you are accepted, respected, and included. When that gauge drops, the emotional alarm system fires, because in the environment your brain evolved for, a drop in social standing was a signal that something dangerous was happening. The anxiety you feel when you think you have embarrassed yourself, or when you catch someone looking at you with what might be judgment, is that alarm doing its job. But there is an additional layer that makes this even harder to manage. Research by psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky at Cornell University uncovered what they called the spotlight effect. In a series of experiments, they asked participants to wear an embarrassing t-shirt and then enter a room full of other people. Afterward, they asked the wearers to estimate how many people in the room had noticed the shirt. The wearers consistently overestimated by a factor of roughly 2. They felt as though a spotlight was shining on them. In reality, most people in the room were too focused on their own concerns to notice much about anyone else. This finding points to something important. Your sense of being observed, evaluated, and judged by the people around you is systematically inflated. You believe you are far more visible than you actually are. The stranger who passed you in the hall and seemed to glance at you critically is, with overwhelming probability, already thinking about something entirely unrelated to you. The brain, however, registers the possibility of judgment and treats it with the same urgency it would treat a confirmed threat. There is also a phenomenon that psychologist David Gilovich and his colleagues have called the illusion of transparency. The tendency to believe that your internal states are more visible to others than they actually are. When you feel nervous in a presentation, you are convinced that everyone can see it. When you feel awkward at a social event, you are certain it shows on your face. Research consistently finds that observers detect far less of what you are feeling than you assume they do. The emotional experience is vivid and consuming on the inside. From the outside, it is largely invisible. These two effects combine to create a kind of social paranoia that is entirely normal, but often deeply uncomfortable. You feel watched. You feel judged. You feel as though every stumble and awkward moment is being cataloged by the people around you. And the reality is that those people are almost entirely preoccupied with their own version of the same experience, worrying about how they are coming across to everyone else in the room, including you. Understanding this intellectually, however, rarely makes it go away. And that is because the system that generates this response is not located in the part of your brain that processes intellectual arguments. It is located in deeper, older structures that respond to social cues automatically and immediately, before conscious reasoning even begins. Telling yourself that strangers' opinions do not matter is a bit like telling yourself not to flinch when something moves toward your face. The flinch is not a choice, it is a reflex. And the social evaluation anxiety your brain generates in the presence of strangers is similarly reflexive. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, whose research into the social brain has shaped much of what we now understand about how human beings process social information, has found that the brain's social network is extraordinarily active and consumes significant neural resources, even when you are not consciously thinking about other people. When your mind wanders, it defaults to thinking about social relationships, about how you are perceived, about what others think and feel. This is not an accident. It is the brain maintaining the social monitoring system that kept your ancestors alive, running it as a kind of background process that never fully switches off. What changes when you understand this is not that the discomfort disappears. It is that you stop reading the discomfort as evidence that something is wrong with you. The person who feels crushing self-consciousness walking into a party is not more neurotic or more insecure than the person who seems relaxed. They are simply more aware of a system that is running in everyone. The seemingly confident person in the room is not free of the social monitoring system. They have simply, for reasons of temperament or experience or deliberate practice, learned to weight its signals differently. The research also reveals something quietly reassuring about the strangers themselves. A study by psychologist Nicholas Epley at the University of Chicago found that when people imagine what strangers are thinking about them, they consistently assume the worst. But when those strangers are actually asked to report their thoughts, the evaluations are almost always far more neutral and far more fleeting than the person being observed had feared. The judgment you are imagining is, in most cases, not happening at all. And when it is passing far more quickly than you think. So the next time you walk into a room and feel that familiar tightening, that sudden awareness of how you are moving, and what you look like, and whether you belong, you are not failing to be confident enough. You are experiencing a system so ancient and so effective that it helped your ancestors navigate the social world for hundreds of thousands of years. It is running correctly. It is simply pointed at the wrong target. The strangers are not watching you. They are too busy wondering if you are watching them.